Welcome to Patriot to the Core. I'm Thad Forrester. This podcast exists because of my little brother, Mark Forrester. He was angered by the attacks on 9/11, so he joined the military to help rid the world of terrorists. On September 29, 2010, he was killed on his first deployment. From his death notification to the dignified transfer ceremony, his viewing, funeral, and subsequent memorials, I was amazed at the new world of warriors we met. These patriots have become close to our family and been huge supports. They stood out because of their willingness to voluntarily fight evil. They believed in freedom. Because of their actions, I started this podcast to interview great Americans who serve their country and communities. Thank you for tuning in. Well, Colleen, it was great to see you back in September at the White House. How many of those events have you been to for those Gold Star family receptions?
I have only been under the first Trump administration. I was able to attend one with both of my brothers and their wives when my dad was honored in much the same way as your brother was honored this time. So only one like that. Through different administrations, I've had an opportunity to be at the White House and meet with senior leaders for Memorial Day or Veterans Day breakfasts, and also to be with Gold Star families then. Under Obama, there was a breakfast where we were able to invite some Gold Star families across generations. But it wasn't as intimate as the one that you were able to experience. That one we did in the last Trump administration and now in this new Trump administration.
Did Trump do one every year, or how many of those has he done?
You know what? I am not certain. I think he has, I will have to get back to you on that.
That's okay.
I'm not
I've
sure.
been curious because there's not a lot online about it.
Right.
There's really not media there.
I honestly can't recall. I remember two in the last administration and one so far in this, but he may have done it every year, or it may have been the breakfast during his first term.
Okay.
But yeah,
Okay, so
that's a
Biden
great.
did two of them too, at least.
Yes, there were annual Memorial Day breakfasts and annual Veterans Day breakfasts. And that's what the presidents in other administrations had done, where they
Okay.
invited Gold Star families to come on a day around Memorial Day or a day of Veterans Day and be able to come. And some were full on breakfast seated tables where the president and first lady with President Obama, they would come around and greet each family. But the ones with President Trump were fewer families and I don't know if it's more personalized, but a very special event where they were given the gift bags with different memorial mementos of the White
Hmm.
House and given the candle that was lit in honor of their fallen hero.
Yeah, that was so cool to get that stuff. And my dad and I split some of the things. I got one of the he took the candle and I took the one from the first lady, and but this one you helped, didn't you help get families? You found some families to come to it.
We did. So what has been wonderful with Sons and Daughters in Touch, which is the Gold Star children from the Vietnam War, is we've been able to kind of help give voice and presence to some of our past conflict, World War II, specifically in Korea, families on issues that concern them, and then also working all the way forward to global war on terror families. So in this case, we were able to bring an MIA family, some Gold Star families, and then an MIA family from Korea, who I had actually just met the week before at the Virginia War Memorial when both of our fathers were part of a new POW-MIA exhibit. So when the White House came back and said, could you work with us in identifying some families who haven't had an honor like this? It was really exciting to be able to call him and connect him to the White House staff who's been working, with incredible care and attention, I think, on that ceremony. I think the president knows what a Gold Star family is. They know that those are cases where they're deployed to hostile action and where the families have had a lot of trauma and loss, and the men and women were warriors. Weren't you moved when the Sullivan brothers, all five Sullivan brothers' names were
Oh my
said?
gosh.
I mean, the
Yeah.
sacrifice some families have given is just awe-inspiring.
Yeah. That ceremony really was just the effect. I have no adequate words for it. I tried to write it down in my journal, but I can tell you that I will never sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic again without just the remembering the power in that room when they sang it. And then looking over and seeing President Trump, getting into it. And I don't know that he was singing, but he was really just loving the spirit and the power of that song.
It is. It's a song I grew up with. So I think of my grandparents. But as you said, to be in a room where you have families who understand the cost of war and who have given some of them multiple family members to upholding America's ideals abroad, that and it just it's so powerful. It's to me like when you raise the flag and you've lost someone who served for that flag, it gives you a whole different meaning for what patriotism is about.
Yeah. Yeah. I told my wife, I was like, don't you dare tell me, don't rhetorically, not really to her, but don't tell me he doesn't care about our military and their families because it seemed very sincere to me of him, the appreciation and respect he has for the military families and the Gold Star families in particular from that reception. Yeah. Powerful. It was awesome.
It was a lot of care and coordination went into it, and I think he values that service and that sacrifice. And I think that we are fortunate because I think that each president that I have had an opportunity to know has had respect for what that service and sacrifice means.
Good. Good. Tony Cordero told me too that he had been to one of those, I think, with Obama. So he told me about the families that y'all found. The family from visit Vietnam. Is that what you said? They were living or in Korea? The family in Korea.
Well, it was an American family whose dad is still missing in action. So a son and a daughter from the Korean War, whose their dad is still unaccounted for in Korea.
Gosh.
So
Okay.
yeah, and just to think, I grew up as a little girl. My dad at that one exhibit right now, his flight helmet is there and his 100 missions hat is there, and a family portrait of him is there. And this MIA son from the Korean War had a photo of him and his sister sitting on their dad's knee. And there's a toy airplane, like a World War II airplane in the photo, and beside the photo in a shadow box is that World War II airplane. And it just brings home that these are not just, amazing warriors, soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines. They are men and women who are missed and loved and remembered by families, and particularly for the MIA families, that they just, that burden of uncertainty is a really, really hard thing when
Yeah.
widow doesn't know if she's in fact a wife or a widow, when a child doesn't know if their dad's ever going to come home.
So your dad, Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shine, will you just tell us about him a little bit and what branch he was in, what he flew, and how many times he had what was his role in the Vietnam War?
So my father was a career Air Force officer. He had joined the military through Colgate University's ROTC program. So he had played football in college, played rugby, and then was doing ROTC as well. I think he always knew he would join. I think he saw the need to join. He was the oldest of four. His great grandfather had served in World War One. His grandfather had served in World War II on General Bradley's staff, and then all four children served in Vietnam. So my dad had gone through pilot training. I was born in Selma, Alabama, before the war, and he was an instructor pilot down there. I think actually helping to teach some of the Saudi folks how to first ride a bicycle and then fly a plane.
Really?
Yeah, in
So
Selma.
was he in stationed in Montgomery and y'all lived in Selma or
No,
what
it
was he
was
doing?
Craig Air Force Base in Selma.
Oh, okay.
And it is, I was down there a few years ago for a Shine Award at Maxwell Air Force Base and going over to see what that base looks like. There's cotton growing on the fields and they're selling off the houses for about $5,000 a house. It was kind of sad, but back in the day, it was a very robust place with the pilots training and teaching. And so then he was transferred from, I think they were up in Plattsburgh, New York. And then after that, the Vietnam War had started and he was deployed. We lived in Okinawa in the beginning, Okinawa, Japan, Kadena Air Force Base. We lived off base. He was flying nuclear alert to Korea at that time. And then all four kids joined as the Vietnam War ramped up. So for the Air Force, he was, and I'm losing my train of thought, Thad. Let me go back and say that all four children served. My father was an Air Force fighter pilot, career Air Force pilot. His youngest brother, Jonathan, was an Army first lieutenant fresh out of West Point, killed in action in October of 1970. His sister, Sarah, was a Red Cross worker. They had about 60 women were joining the Red Cross and not serving as donut dollies, but as serving as military service in hospitals. So his sister was there before coming back to become a career Army nurse. And his brother Al was West Point class of 63. He was an ARVN advisor and company commander in Vietnam. He was wounded while we were stationed in Okinawa. And I just remember being a kid and he came through on his way stateside. He calls it his $1 million wound because he survived and was able to come back and, serve another 20 years, retire from the military, and then serve as a commandant of cadets at a military academy. So he's still alive today, still fits in his uniform, pretty amazing man. But when he came through, my dad had already done 100 missions. Now his little brother's been killed in action, and his middle brother was wounded. And I've talked about it a couple of times, but it really struck me in that way that children don't understand everything that's happening while they're children. And sometimes it takes a lifetime to put those pieces together. And so when my Uncle Al came through on his way to stateside, he had so many stitches and so much shrapnel in his abdomen and shoulders that it looked like a zipper. And I really believed him when he joked, I have so many surgeries, they use that to just unzip me when they need to have another surgery. It's easier. And I was a full-on adult before I realized you don't just unzip people's, stomach to give them surgery. So, I guess what I can say is all of his he and his siblings knew there was a job to be done. I know before his second tour, he wrote his parents and said, if we pull out now, you can color the whole region red. So, they believed in what they were doing. I know even when my uncle came back from Vietnam after the end of the war, they housed Vietnamese refugees.
Wow.
They believed in freedom for the people of Vietnam and in stopping communism.
How did your dad's parents, how did they handle this? They got four children serving. They lose a child, Jonathan. So your dad's younger brother, is he older or younger than Al?
He's
Jonathan.
the youngest
He's the
brother.
youngest.
So
He's
it's
killed in action.
John, yeah, it's Al and then John.
What was the effect that had on his parents and just the family?
Again, I was a child. What I can say is that faith has played a role. It played a role for my Uncle John at West Point. He was a servant leader. He was very smart, very athletic. He did the Iron Cross in gymnastics, and he was very much a leader with a sense of moral integrity to him as a very young man. And so the faith that he had is something that his parents also had. I remember my grandmother saying, Joshua 1:9, have I not commanded you, be of good faith and good courage, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And so I think they knew that, I don't know, by the time my dad was on his second tour and they had already lost John, I think they knew that whatever happened to him, God was with him or he was with God, and it was all okay. That verse of,
Oh my gosh.
and again, that concept of there's things worth fighting for. And we are a nation that when you're called, somebody has to go. Whom shall I send? Here I
Yeah.
am,
Yeah.
send me.
God bless them. Wow. What was the response like? Or do you know, like when your parents end up having they end up with two children killed. I mean, not your parents, your grandparents
Right.
have two children killed, another one wounded. Do you know? I don't know if maybe y'all knew a lot of people that were losing people in the war. I'm not sure, but what was the reaction like from their community?
When my Aunt Gail, John's widow, when she learned about the news of John, she was out supporting a friend who had just lost her husband, and she got the call that John had been killed, and she stayed out and continued through the funeral of Guy Lester with his widow, and then came back. So when I was in high school, my grandmother Shine gave me a book called The White Cliffs of Dover. In it, I remember there's a woman working in a Red Cross hospital, basically, and writing letters for the wounded, and they come to tell her that her son's been killed. And in it, she says, the dead must wait on the living. And she continued to write those letters for those soldiers who were living. My grandmother was a New York president for American Red Cross. So they knew the cost of war already. Certainly, anyone who watched the nightly news back then knew that we were losing folks. And when you have your first son killed, it certainly brings it home. I recently have been cleaning out my mom's estate, and in it found the letters that my grandmother had given her. Now my mother's passed, my grandmother's passed, my grandfather's passed. And so those letters have come down to me. And there's a letter that my grandmother wrote to my father right before he left for his second tour. And it was, again, just really solid in trusting his decision as a father and a pilot and a husband and a son. They all knew the cost of war. I think being good at what you do gives you a confidence. By then he was 33. He wasn't, a young, flighty person who had more confidence than brains or ability. He was a seasoned fighter pilot, and I think she trusted him to know what he was capable of. They both all trusted God to be watching over them in whatever circumstance came to be. And again, if not their son, whose son? For my dad, if
Yeah.
not him, someone was going to go. So he did volunteer to go again, and I think they accepted that. My grandmother came down and visited. We have photos of that last visit before he deployed to Vietnam. And
Wow.
so I think that says from New York to South Carolina, they know that could be a last visit. Everyone went in with their eyes open.
Yeah. So they had one son, Jonathan, killed in action. So they must have gotten his remains back.
My
Is that
father
right?
flew escort for his brother's body back from Southeast Asia and to West Point and stood vigil through the night before the funeral. And then he went back after the
Gosh.
funeral. So yes, my Uncle John is buried at West Point. There's a really special award in the form of a Bible that is given to a young servant leader each year in his name, which I think is a really special legacy. And for my dad's legacy back in 1980. My mom and my grandfather, my dad's dad, work with the Air Force to set up the only MIA award that I know exists in the Air Force, and it's the Lieutenant Colonel Anthony C. Shine Award. And it's now in its 44th year, which is pretty special. It is a two-part award where they have to be both, exceptional in flying a tactical fighter aircraft and exceptional in terms of character as demonstrated through community service. So each year we're meeting wherever it is in the globe under whichever the major commands of the Air Force the winner is, someone who is young, who will benefit by an award of that stature at this point, for being a good man and a good pilot. And
Who's on that board to make that decision to
um,
choose?
it's done by the Chief of Staff of the Air Force has to sign off, but each wing globally can present nominees, a nominee for it, and then the senior leadership of the Air Force makes that determination
Okay.
and signs off on that package. And I'm grateful we're not on that committee. We don't have the insights to know, but
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you we have met a lot of men. It's neat when you think about STEM training for young people and that mentorship concept. It's very rare that we meet the top fighter pilot in the Air Force and his mom or his wife or he don't say, I was a little kid and I went to air shows and I looked up and I saw that and I knew I wanted to, or the mom saying he used to sit in the recliner with using a pot on his head for the helmet and, use the remote control as his throttle and, just want to do something adventuresome and courageous and worthwhile. So
Wow, that's
really
awesome. Since
special to have
1980.
that. Yeah, special to have it connected to him and for us to have a connection through the Air Force in that way. That there's Air Force families forever, but that's not always been the case. At some points during the Vietnam War, it was Air Force family until you lose your loved one, then move off the base in a couple weeks and get along with your life. Um, and things like the council that you and I were able to serve on together, the Survivor Advocacy Council in the Air Force, and the Army has a Survivor Advocacy Working Group, and other services have similar setups so that survivors can provide firsthand input into the casualty and mortuary affairs process. They can help our military service branches make better decisions about how they notify families, how they handle the remains of the deceased. Back in the Vietnam War, two family members, in addition to the mother or father or wife, were able to come. So if you had 5 children, two got to come to the funeral. We would never
Yeah.
think of such a thing at this point. We would
Yeah.
know that it's important for all children to be able to go to their parents' funeral if that were, if that case happened and they wanted to, and the parents felt it was age appropriate.
Yeah. By the way, that council that you and I served on and that has continued, are you still working with the Survivor Advocacy Council with the Air Force?
I continue to work with, we had Randy Ramsher on. They now have Carrie Mursky, so she's the DoD Gold Star rep for the Air Force and or DOW. So I do reach out to her regularly, and I know a lot of the folks who served on it and the people that we worked with while we were on it. So I continue that almost as a alumni network. When
Okay.
you need something done, when you want another solid opinion of someone reasonable who can look at both sides of an issue, then I reach out to them. And I've certainly worked to get the word out that Air Force survivors have an opportunity to serve to apply to serve on that council. I think it's really important that we continue to do so, especially, in many ways we're preparing for war again, and mass casualties that come with that.
Right.
And we want those as many procedures in place so that the airman, in our case with the Air Force, the airman or the soldier, is able to identify who does he want his benefits to be handed to in the event of his passing. Young people don't always think about that. So it was really special to be able to for the Air Force to tie that into something that was important to them, that they had to do annually, so that we know they would be looking at it and those things would be up to date. You might have a brand new marriage and parents in need and a wife not in need, and a soldier dies or an airman dies, and then that wife gets everything, and those parents don't have enough money to pay their rent. You want the soldier really thinking about the realities that could happen.
Yeah.
And you want the casualty and mortuary affairs to understand they're working with basically the same budget in the Air Force's case as they had 20 years ago. They've got a lot more people to serve. We advocated for more manpower and support for them to do their job better, because at that time, when you get a knock on the door, how that casualty officer approaches you is something that'll be a memory your whole life. Whether they were informed and personable and connected you to resources that were important, and whether they followed up with more resources, when you had your wits about you a few months or years later, whatever the case is, those things are important. So
Yeah.
yes, I continue to advocate wherever I can. I am not on the council anymore. I served with you, and then I served as the mentor to the next council for 2 years, and that was the cap.
Well, I'm glad that I believe our council had a good mixture of spouse, child, sibling. I think we did. I know the Gold Star Advisory Council now that I'm on has
Mhm.
that mixture, but I believe I'm the only sibling, which is kind of crazy. But we need all that representation, because I have this one little a few things that are what I've experienced or what's important to me, but other people have had some much different experiences, and my gosh, there's some messes out there, really complicated situations, and some horrible stories that really have opened my eyes since I've been with you, and then in 2020, and then now with the main Gold Star group.
Right. Well, I think it's important too, and I think siblings are often overlooked as you look at each of the relationships. A child could get a step parent, not that they're really replacing the parent, but you could get a new husband or wife. You don't ever get another sibling really in that same way. And I certainly watch my dad's sibling, Sandy, we call him Al. Um, he every Veterans Day he writes my brothers and me. He's a veteran himself. He's a two-time Gold Star brother. He lost his oldest brother. He lost his youngest brother. I watched my aunt who died early, and just the impact on them, what you carry with you. You're an adult. As I said, I was a child. The war was done unto me. I didn't really understand everything that was going on, didn't even know that you can't unzip a human body, so I certainly learned a lot along the way, but I have lots of friends in Sons and Daughters in Touch, which is 20,000 kids lost dads in the Vietnam War. Some of them lost dads that they didn't even know. Their mom was in the maternity ward giving birth to them, or she they weren't even born yet, or they were 2 and don't remember him, or they were 16 and he was a deep confidant of theirs and really important, and they lost him, during adolescence. And, that whole gamut, it's just hard. There is no good time to lose a parent or a brother, especially to war.
Yeah. Well, Colleen, what do you remember about your dad?
I remember his presence probably. I remember his sense of integrity. If he said something was going to happen, it was going to happen. Like there was just a trust. He was a strong man. He was strong in moral character and in physical stature. Even like he did a mock Olympics for his wing at the very end of the Vietnam War. I think it was probably fall of 1972, so the end of his Vietnam War. And they did a mock Olympics on the beach, and I remember building the little paper mache, arm up to here, saying I'm strong, I'm going to win in hand wrestling, arm wrestling, or, in a pole vault or a long jump or whatever the thing was. He had had polio as a child. And so I think he had a sense of determination that a lot of people didn't get as young as he got. So we kids got the benefit of that. He liked adventure. We used to go out both in the Pacific Ocean in Okinawa and in the Atlantic Ocean in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and go out in the waves, in the wild force, swim out past where it changes color. And I always knew I was safe with him, and a good sense of adventure and a sense of accountability. I remember we woke my mom up one time at the BOQ after he had told us not to, and we all got a whooping. So, he followed through with what he said, whatever that was. Um,
He looked like a fit, actually a buff guy. Is that right?
yes, he had a weight room. Yep, when we were in Okinawa, there are typhoons there and on the Pacific, and when he was deployed, we would use his weight room to incubate baby birds that we had gotten out of the shutters. But yeah, he was always drinking protein powder and raw eggs and all the everything. And um, so yes, he was a strong man. And I think he always kept one of those squeegees in his hand, in his pocket, from that one hand having surgery following polio.
Really? So you mean to squeeze to build up his fingers and his forearms and
Yep.
stuff?
Mhm.
Oh wow.
Yep, they were in pretty much every jacket. I think
You
my
don't
brother.
see those much anymore.
No,
Well, so you say that was in 72 when he did those mock Olympics. So he must have. So what happened, Colleen? He got deployed one more time. He had one more mission or something happened.
right. He flew the F-105 Thunder Chief in his first tour in 1967 and 68. When he was deployed, it was October of 72, um, his last deployment, and he was missing 6 weeks later. He did 24 missions in that time, and he was flying on the border of North Vietnam and Laos on the it was a armed reconnaissance mission. He was with a young, I think they called them FNGs. I don't know if you know that, but
Yeah.
a new rookie pilot behind him, wingman, and he descended a cloud covering after strafing a convoy on Route 7. And he told the rookie to stay up above the clouds, that he was going to just go check the situation out. And I don't know if he was checking out to see, whether the convoy was fully demolished or, what exactly that was, but he descended the cloud covering. His wingman lost touch, and he was not heard from again. So they told our family he disappeared beneath a cloud covering on the border of North Vietnam and Laos. And I know that he had just been flying the search and rescue weeks before. So he knew the area well, a seasoned pilot, having already flown 100 missions on his first tour and then back, had already flown more than 20 on this tour. And I think he knew the area. He had been working search and rescue, and he had finished a Sears class. So we knew that if he hit the ground, if he was able to escape an aircraft, then he stood a strong chance, as strong as any, to have survived that crash and to be able to survive in the jungle. He was smart, he was strong, and he had just been through the training necessary to survive in that circumstance, including being held prisoner. So we were we considered that he would be held prisoner of war because we didn't know if he did or not be taken into that prison system. So we started sending the kinds of things that you were allowed to send, all these special specifications to send to him, care of the Vietnamese prison system. And
So
that,
there was like a main address that you could send things to?
yep, we sent, a lot of people were able to send letters and care packages to prisoners, and we airdropped postcards in English and Vietnamese with his picture offering a reward.
How did you do that?
My mom and grandfather did it privately, and I don't know what the organization was that they worked through. I can tell you, as an 8-year-old, there was a misprint on the postcards, and so they weren't going to send it. I believe it was in the Vietnamese language, so they weren't going to send that batch. And I sat there with my little, elementary school round tipped scissors and tried to cut his face out of every one because they were going to put him in the burn barrel. And I didn't want even his image burned. So, you just talk about so much pain for a family. It was weeks before Christmas. He had just written me a letter that week and said, I won't be home for Christmas, but we'll have a party. I'll be home soon and we'll have a party when I get there. And I still remember what it felt like to take Christmas presents and put them at the top of my grandmother's closet for when Dad came home, and still hoping that he would. Back at the time where I mentioned we were doing the mock Olympics, trying to raise the morale of his wingmates in South Carolina, I was already wearing a POW bracelet for a Captain James Seahorn, who had been one of his fellow F-105 pilots. And he had daughters, and I knew them, and they were around my age. So our whole family wore POW bracelets before my dad was missing in action. And in Operation Homecoming at the end of the war, when the Hanoi taxi started bringing loads of prisoners back, I remember watching, that arrival on the tarmac. And I had said to my mom, do you know if Dad is coming back? And she thought I meant the more general question of, is he coming back? And she answered honestly, I don't know. I was asking the question, is he going to be on one of these planes that we're going to be watching? She knew he wasn't. I didn't know he wasn't.
Oh,
So I remember that feeling of joy that Captain James Seahorn, now General James Seahorn, a father and a grandfather, came back, and
hmm.
that you could hold hope for a long time and have it fruitfully come to fruition that that person arrived back home safe and sound. But, just knowing that wasn't the case for my dad. And as I became a mother years later, trying to explain to my own children about how we pray, you pray wanting an answer. And our answer, I prayed every day for many, many years. My grandmother had on their refrigerator a praying hands poster that said, for those returned, thank you, God. For those still missing, please, God. God does not always answer prayer in our way or in our time. But I can say, the years that the locusts have eaten have been repaid in many ways. There have been a lot of silver linings, a lot of God winks, a lot of connections to my dad through this loss. I know him to have been someone who would say, if you are given lemons, get cracking on the lemonade, and so the community that I've been able to be a part of, both with Gold Star Children through Sons and Daughters in Touch. I served for a lot of years in roles with POWMIA related organizations, the National League of POWMIA Families, particularly, where my grandfather also served on the board. Having mentors. When I was growing up, I didn't know if my dad was alive or dead. And so when I got to go do my dad's freedom flight out at Randolph Air Force Base and put on combat boots and get ejection seat training and literally for one set of hours walk in his footsteps, I was addressing the American ex-POWs that weekend, talking on the MIA issue. They were my mentors. They were people like Paul Galanti, who said, if there's what is it? It's a good day if there's a doorknob on the inside of the door. That's the kind of perspective. Or Ev Alvarez, a Navy pilot who was the first down and second longest held pilot in Vietnam. Someone asked him, what did you do in 13 months of solitary confinement? How did you handle being alone? And he just looked to the heavens and he was like, I was never alone. Those were the kinds of people, as well as, my Vietnam veteran Uncle Al, who came back, who housed refugees from South Vietnam in their home as he raised their children, an adopted child, and then went on to serve as a commandant of cadets at a military academy, and whose son, Jonathan, is teaching right now. He's an Army colonel teaching at the Army War College in Carlisle. And his name is Jonathan Anthony Shine, after both of his uncles, who are on panel 1 West and panel 6 West of the wall, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in DC. And he is raising his children with that same sense of value and warrior ethos. So it's nice to have a lineage. I talked to him recently and said, I was at a friend's funeral at Arlington, and the Army chaplain who came to do the service said, I know your name. He didn't know it from the Air Force or from my dad. He knew it from my dad's nephew, from Jonathan Shine, who was an Iraq and Afghanistan veteran. So, it's nice to have people who are willing to take up that mantle and live lives that are accountable and of service with servant hearts.
Colleen, going back, how were you, or how was your mom, or how were y'all notified that your dad went missing? Did they do it on the phone? Was it a letter? Did somebody come to your house in South Carolina, I guess? So can you just tell me how you really found out and what they told you?
So we were in upstate New York, where my mom lives. We were there early to spend the Christmas holidays from our home in South Carolina. And we received word. I was at my aunt and uncle's, my mom's brother and his wife's, just down the road from my mom's mom's. And we were in baking Christmas. I don't remember if it was bread or cookies, but something yummy. And we were there, and someone came to the door, and my aunt ushered me into the kitchen. And I knew something important was going on, and I wanted to be out there, but she was trying to occupy me, and I was trying to listen. And, after that, my mom came into the kitchen a few minutes later and said, we're going to go up to grandma's. I have something I want to talk to your brother and you about. And I remember running through the snow with her, holding her hand, looking at her and knowing something's not okay. And I kept asking, what's wrong, mommy? And she's like, let's run. And we ran. And in a funny, complete circle kind of way, one of the nonprofits that I work with is called Wear Blue, Run to Remember. And they take that emotion that we have in grief and loss, and they put movement to it. You put the time where you honor and remember, and then you move. So I love that she had that foresight to say, let's run, because we're both winded. It was cold, it was snowy. We got to my grandmother's house, and she sat my brother and I down, and she told us the truth. We were sitting on a bright orange velvet Victorian love seat, and I still remember the buttons in the footstool of that, just as I heard missing and tried to understand what missing was. I knew what killed was. I knew what never coming back was, but I didn't exactly know how to hold on to that hope of missing. And I often have said that her telling us the truth, that dad was prepared professionally, personally, in every way to survive if he were able to survive. She said that his buddies were looking for him, but that they hadn't found him. and that it might be a long time before we knew. But her telling the truth was so important because over nearly 24 years of advocacy on the PWMIA issue, it wasn't always the truth that we were told, and it wasn't always something we could trust. So that she was willing to, say, we don't know, I don't know, because now as a parent, you want to give anything to tell your child to wrap it in a bow, however horrible it is, that they could wrap their hands and their hearts around it, their heads around it. And she didn't, because we didn't know. And so
Yeah.
when we were trying to send things to him in the prison system, my older brother he picked out in this huge warehouse that we got to visit a whistle, compass, mirror, gadget, bright orange thing that was supposed to help him navigate his way home. And I picked freeze-dried steak because my dad loves steak. So again, you look at, my mom gave us appropriate information for the age of who we.
Yeah. And you have no idea, the Vietnamese, they just took that and, did whatever with it, right? The prison system. I mean, nothing was ever
It was
sent
never
back or,
returned to us, no. I hope they gave it to another prisoner, and I hope it helped him escape.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So, Colleen, I'm putting some timelines together here, so you'll have to, fill in and correct me, but I really want to get to the 1987 part. I think that's when you go over there the first time. But at that point, you must be about 23 years old. So you went a long time. Well, how long did you go not knowing really if your dad was alive or dead?
Advocacy started on the playground in elementary school, passing out PWMIA bumper stickers. We hadn't heard anything. We were dropping the flyers over Vietnam, not hearing anything. My grandfather was at the Paris Peace Accords that end the war. He was serving on boards. My mother was working as a state coordinator in South Carolina, with Bob Hope, wearing my dad's POW bracelet. So all of that was going on in a total void of any information about his whereabouts. For 14 years, we didn't hear anything about his fate. I was graduated from college. I went to Wellesley up in Boston, came down and was working as a PR director for the National League of POWMIA Families. During that time, there was a cottage industry in Vietnam with remains. They had, the local villagers and the government had realized that there was American interest in our missing. President Reagan had named the PWMIA issue a highest national priority. And in Southeast Asia, there was a cottage industry where they were selling information, trying to sell information and remains and dog tags, some of which were being fabricated and not at all the real, dog tags of our missing. But I was sitting at the desk answering calls and planning public awareness on the PWMIA issue for all of the men that were missing when we got a call that I just happened to take from Air Force Casualty Office. And they were asking for the family of Anthony Shine and wanted to share some information. And it was dog tag type information that had come in on him, a refugee claiming to have a dog tag that related to him. And over the course of the next about 12 years, we got as many reports, up to and including a live sighting report in the mid 1990s out of Cambodia. And
A life sighting, you said? Like,
yeah, talk about raised and dashed hopes. Absolutely. So, we've got overlapping. Our government says, okay, we're interviewing this refugee, or we interviewed a refugee who said there might be a tentative crash site in the vicinity of where your dad was missing. So we're following up on that, and they would send us what they'd done, and we would send back, what about this? What about this? Is there, can you also check on this? And so we were working to support our government in doing what they were doing with field operations. So in 1994, I went over with our government. I went over with the National League of PWMIA Families with their board of directors, advocating with the governments of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia for more transparency, more unilateral opening of the archives, sharing what happened to our last known alive missing. And during that time, I got a briefing on my dad's case. And again, it felt like there was more that could be done. We were told after that visit that there was nothing more they could do. They had gone in and interviewed a witness. He had a helmet that was his memento of the war. We asked them to go back in on their next visit to the region and take pictures of that helmet. They did. They sent us about 20 pictures of the helmet, said no identifiable markings, nothing further to learn. We're going to put this case in a pending category. And they did that. And it was at that point that I thought, my grandfather worked on this, my mother worked on it. I've spent my whole life on this. If we are never going to know, I need to know that Vietnam is more than just, a place where my dad lost his life. I need to go over, I need to see for myself and know the land, the people, the culture that he died trying to save. And so when I went over there, I was able to rent a Russian Jeep, travel south from Hanoi to a little bit south of Vinh, north of Da Nang, right on that Laotian border. And obviously, we didn't have normalization of relations then, so I had to have a handler with me and a translator with me. But by the time we got to the village, met with the villager, our government had said that it was too steep a climb and that they had to turn back. But this villager was there in flip-flops with a machete, and I followed him up in hiking boots. And when we're midway up the mountain, instead of everything scavenged for scrap metal, there's a turbine engine that has numbers on it. And then when we get to the top of the mountain in a ravine between two, there is aircraft wreckage on the surface. And I was not prepared for that. We came back.
What year was this?
I think this was 1995.
Okay, so you went in 94 first, and then you
That's
went back in 95. Okay.
right. And so the villager and our government had said that witnesses, particularly this one witness, said that the pilot was in his ejection seat and that they buried him in a garden plot. So I asked, could you show me the garden plot? So they took us down to a shallow grave. Because our government had already been in, they had already known that there was interest. So there was already some remains removed from that grave site. But I sat in that grave site for hours, trying to negotiate with the Vietnamese before me to get information to try to learn what happened to him. Was he alive or dead, and what was their knowledgeability? We know that the Vietnamese kept very good wartime records. We know that they had provincial museums where they had personal effects of American pilots and soldiers. So anyway, when I came back from that visit, the villager, as I was leaving that day, the villager gave me the helmet. I turn it over and see that my dad's name is handwritten in it. And so I had to spend that night in a barn in the little hamlet. And before leaving the next morning, I went back and asked if I could meet with the villager and show him my POW bracelet said Shine. This helmet said Shine. They were both in all caps. Can I take this helmet back to the US? And if it's not my dad's, I would get it returned to him. And he agreed. I was able to leave with the helmet and to meet with our government detachments there, leave them some bags of wreckage that they could then sort through and get to the right, life sciences equipment laboratory to look at any personal effects, look for serial numbers. And I came home with the helmet, and pretty quickly I went over and met with General Shalikashvili at the Pentagon, which is literally at the end of my road is the Pentagon, and was able to meet with him and say, look at this helmet. This is not how we want cases of families who are less involved to have their cases handled. And then I went and testified on Capitol Hill and said, use this case as an example. This should not be happening.
Is that the same helmet that they told you there were no markings? There's nothing
Yes.
more we can do.
Yeah.
They never even looked at it, did they?
They did enough to take pictures. So I don't know. And I wasn't then, and I'm still not about pointing a finger of blame. I am about improving a process. I have pushed hard that everyone who works on all sides of the PWMI accounting mission, they do so with a sense of integrity and accountability as if it were their brother or their father or their son or their husband who was unaccounted for. Have they dotted every I and every T? Have they unturned every stone there? Right now, there's some exciting developments, and maybe we can do something to kind of talk to your audience about that if it turns out that there's interest. But there is satellite imagery that was taken during the war that are now, we're able to get our hands on that and apply it to the accounting mission so that our government agency, the Defense PWMI Accounting Agency now, but there were about 9 predecessor agencies through the decades, that they would be able to be looking in the right place. And there is eDNA for underwater losses, where you can scoop up sand and water and be able to find out whether there was DNA in that vicinity.
Oh, wow.
There's ground penetrating radar. There are cadaver dogs. You've got to work on the two sides, one being policy and one being operations. And the operations has a lot of technology. And with the policy side, Vietnam now has the highest level of strategic cooperation with the United States. And I'd like to see us find ways to have some stick with the carrot,
Yeah.
they are not fully forthcoming. There's a lot of cases that they could readily provide information on.
Who's not forthcoming?
The Vietnamese.
Okay.
We're grateful for the cooperation that they have given, and they have given some, but they could do a lot more to answer questions for our families. And this is a humanitarian issue. It's a bipartisan issue. And I can tell you from our family and the many, many I know whose loved ones have been missing double the amount of time mine ever was, that it is a terrible burden of uncertainty.
Yeah. Colleen, that night when you saw the helmet, you said you slept in a barn or a hut or something. Did you sleep?
Hardly.
Well, yeah, what was going on?
It was on my chest. I wasn't letting go of it. I had something that betrayal, a sense of betrayal was going on, that a lot of confusion. How could this be? I know personally many of the people that were working the mission at that time, and I knew them to be good and dedicated professionals. So I don't know. I just know I wanted to leave the country with that helmet, and I wanted to get it back to the Life Sciences Equipment Laboratory that could test it to know if this helmet is intact, could the pilot who was wearing it also be intact?
So what else did you find out then?
When I brought it back, I went via Hawaii, where the Joint Task Force full accounting was, and where the DPAA Central Identification Laboratory that's been morphed into DPA now, where that Central Identification DNA lab was. And I met with the general in charge, and he put the other folks out of the room, and he leaned in and he said, "Colleen, tell me, you wrote that name in the helmet, didn't you?" And so no, I didn't. So part of what we learned when we came back was the helmet was sent to the Secret Service lab, and at the White House, it was sent to have the ink date happen, and it was Air Force issue indelible ink used in the late 1960s. And the handwriting analysis said it was my father's handwriting. I didn't go and write his name in this helmet. I was that gave me way too much credit.
So
But
they didn't believe you at first.
no,
Then what else happened? So there was some DNA
oh,
taken?
yes, they went back in and did a full-scale excavation after my raising quite a ruckus. And they went back in, did a full-scale excavation, were able, as I mentioned, the remains had been robbed from the grave by the time they were able to get there, or had disintegrated in part. We don't know, but we know there was a green leaf in the grave when they came back to excavate. And that wouldn't have stayed for too long a time. What they recovered were just fragments. They could fit in a small Ziploc bag, and they did. But they were the proof for me that enough pieces of the puzzle fit together that we knew that my dad had died, that he wasn't walking around a third world country with, out part of his clavicle or finger bones, that we did believe he died on December 2, 1972. And in August of 1995, our government sent folks to our home with a full binder full of everything they had done to identify every piece of what they excavated, all the personal effects, serial numbers, and it did all fit together. It wasn't a complete puzzle, but we believed it. We accepted the identification. We had a military funeral complete with a F-15E flyover at Arlington Cemetery, and we buried him with fellow veterans there to have some peace of mind and heart, knowing he was accounted for and back on American soil with his mother, with my mother, with us children. And there was a lot of peace in that. About 6 months later, I can still remember where I was when I got the call. I received a call from the casualty officer saying someone has returned remains in Laos to our detachment. It's a half of a jawbone, and we believe it's your dad's. And that to me was an incredible gift, because the mitochondrial DNA that we had wasn't the 1 in a million O.J. Simpson kind that you were looking for. It was, it was a lot of pieces of puzzle. DNA is a lot different now, and a lot more exact than it was then. But odontological forensic anthropology, we were able to take x-rays of my dad taken by his dentist when he was alive and superimpose them and match up restorations that had happened. I told you he played football, so that passion for football, meant some teeth impacted by that. So to me, that was an incredible gift. It was total surety that my dad died on December 2, 1972, doing something he believed in and flying, which is something he loved.
When did you know that he was no longer missing in action? At what point did you know for sure?
Accepted the identification in August of 1990. Let me see. I'm sorry, August of 1996 his remains that they recovered were repatriated, and I had to look it up for you. June 6, 1995 is when the repatriation happened of those fragments of remains. And then 2nd of August 1996 was when they came to our home, and with my dad's brother and my mom and my brothers, we accepted their proposal of an identification
Wow.
and scientific evidence.
So when you were holding his helmet in 95, you knew that you believe, well, he may have lived or be alive still.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I can't remember if it was 94, but somewhere in that time frame, there was the live sighting report that came out of Cambodia. And did I really think he was alive and being held in Cambodia? Not exactly, but follow up,
right.
because the Vietnamese did keep prisoners for many decades when they fought the French. And, so it's important. The code of conduct is important. It says we will search to the ends of the earth, to account for you. And that when you wear that military uniform, it's a covenant. And so I'm super grateful, but my heart aches for 1,566 families from the Vietnam War alone who don't have that peace of heart and mind that comes with knowing the fate of a missing loved one. And as I said, I was just with a Korean War family. He's waited a lot longer, as has his sister and his mother.
Yeah.
So it's a very tough issue. It's our nation's moral obligation, I think, to honorably resolve this issue. And it's incredibly heartening to see grandchildren and nieces, picking up that mantle and continuing to be the legal advocates for these men,
Hmm.
the primary next of kin. You can do something that while we get a lot of support on the mission from our veteran service organizations, that family member involvement is crucial because they're the primary next of kin.
That the wreckage, that was your dad's plane.
Yes.
And so he never ejected.
The witness said he did. I don't know when or if I'll ever know exactly what happened. I don't know if he sustained, small arms fire after strafing the convoy. I don't know if it was a cloudy day and he hit a mountainside and crashed. We don't know that. What I do know is some of the new satellite imagery or old satellite imagery that we now newly have access to may provide even more answers, and each time you're able to meet someone who was there at that time, sometimes you get a kernel of information and piece it together. It's most important that we knew that whether he was alive or dead. If we ever get the full story, it may be in heaven when we ask him or God, but
Hmm.
I'm open to new information. You can sign a form that says if additional remains come back, do you want them? Yes, we want them. And any information that might tell us what happened in those moments.
Do you think there ever records of radio transmissions between him and someone else?
No, he
Hmm.
said he told the wingman he was going to descend the cloud covering for reconnaissance and for him to stay up above the clouds. And there was one flash of light, but they think that it was from the convoy based on, now that we've been able to go back and be at the site, feet on the ground 50 years later, the coordinates of where the pilots were makes it seem that the light that they saw was not necessarily my father's crash, but the convoy that he had strafed. But
Okay.
again, those details are conjecture. When I look at families whose loved one was at the tip of Vietnamese guns, alive on the ground, boots on the ground, and he's not back alive or dead, that those are the kind of questions we need to be answering right now. And my family will be, grateful for anything we learn through the years
Yeah.
or through new technologies or old ones that have surfaced.
So in 96, when this all kind of came together, his parents were still alive
Uh,
and your
my
mom,
grandmother was,
your
and
grandmother was.
yeah,
Okay.
and she was really, really amazing. When she passed, she was 86, and she said, I know why God has let me live so long. It's because I still have a lot to learn. She was not for a big funeral. She was thinking something small would be right. And I said, our family is an example to other families and might give them hope if they saw something that, was bigger. And the veterans who served with my dad deserved to be able to come and, pay respects. Not that just our family cared about what happened to him, but all of those who served with them that we were still connected to. So she agreed, and we held a funeral at Arlington. And afterwards, she came and found me and gave me her folded flag and said, I'm glad I'm living this long because I have a lot to learn. And thank you. And this belongs to you.
Oh, wow.
Um, a special moment again, there, but for the grace of God, go, go our family, still waiting for answers.
Hmm. Well,
We're,
I've often said that Sorry, go ahead, Colleen.
No, no, I just said we're grateful.
I've always often said that we're fortunate that we got Mark's body back. He was killed, and there weren't all these there are unknowns, but nothing like what you went through, and just about how tough that would have to be with families not knowing where their loved one is or what happened or what's going on with them at this moment. I cannot even imagine what you and your family have gone through. What have you been able to, or how are ways that you comfort people who are going through something similar?
For the MIA issue,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
when we have opportunities for them to honor their loved one, to speak and advocate, to me, advocacy is it's an opportunity to do something about your situation. And so last week I was given some tickets for a holiday package at the Gaylord Center here in Oxon Hill, Maryland. It was a chance to be in a special hotel that celebrates the Christmas time with, snow falling down and a show based, it's called Ice. It's a show that you buy tickets to based on Polar Express.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing we did at Sons and Daughters in Touch was called an MIA family, that they might have some connection to their own family, that they might have a special honor and a chance to connect and have a happy holiday memory. I did a lot of advocacy in my 20s and 30s before having children. That was like, I remember being on the Oprah Winfrey show around Thanksgiving week. And I was on with somebody who had lost their child, who was on a milk carton, and she was talking about how does it feel to have an empty seat at your Thanksgiving table, and she had all of these different people representing what that empty seat might look like and what the details of it are. And so what I've found through the years is if you listen, if you bring people together who have a similar experience, there's tremendous healing in that. I often joke, just put them at a table and give them a piece of bread, and the healing will happen, just like with our veterans. If you can acknowledge, recognize, lend a hand, and give them a community with people who understand, in our own way, MIA families and Gold Star families are like we're in a foxhole. I don't really know you that well, but I know your brother through you and what he stood for and how he served and how he sacrificed. And I know the time and the energy of you, and now I know your dad. And so to me, we're almost like foxhole buddies. Your loss wasn't exactly mine, mine wasn't exactly yours, but there is a common thread and a common resilience and a common willingness to continue to love this country enough to work to fix her where she needs fixing and to support her and be that true patriot.
Give them some bread and put them at the table.
Mhm. Well, I mean,
Well,
that's kind of what we were given, right?
that's right.
Give them a mission where you can give them a mission.
That's right. One thing you said to me, Colleen, as we wrap it up is you had said this to me years ago about flying the POW MIA flag. Can you tell me about that, or maybe when it's appropriate, or where, or that kind of thing, or what it's some significance of it?
It is, there's a One Flag Act that President Trump signed, which gives the exemption for the POWMIA flag to be one of very few flags allowed to fly beneath Old Glory. When it was first started that the POWMIA flag would be in the Capitol Rotunda, it was over federal buildings like the Pentagon, the State Department, the White House, the Capitol, and then post offices in communities across the country. Now, and that was for 6 military-related holidays a year. Now it can be flown under the American flag in all circumstances. In any circumstance where the American flag can be flown, it is appropriate to fly the POWMIA flag. And I think it's incredibly important that people in communities understand what it is, because it is not just about cleaning up the battlefields from past war. or about ending uncertainty for the families of those wars and bringing, keeping the code of conduct and bringing that man or woman home. It is about a covenant with those who don the military uniform today that we've got your back. We're not going to forget you or forsake you
Hmm.
if you wear that uniform and serve our nation. And
Have you flown that flag?
yeah,
Have you had it like flown it like your whole life?
I have. I don't have a flag up right now in our home for a number of reasons. Kind of, I'm not wearing a POWMIA bracelet right now either. I put my dad's bracelet in his casket, the one that I had worn with his name on it all those years. And occasionally I'll wear one, but we all have to choose, what is our threshold? Right now I'm giving my time and my energy to the mission. I had an event every single night this week and most days as well. And so the POWMIA flag, I support it greatly, but I'm not flying it every single day, nor am I actually flying the American flag outside my house every day. There's one of both in my house, but I don't have a Gold Star license plate. I don't, you give in different ways. I
Yeah,
have been
right.
at this for more than 50 years. But you can bet I stand to attention at every flag that's
Yeah.
passed. And at my summer home, we do raise and lower it every day like we did as kids. Thank you for doing this podcast. We said I don't know when you will air it, but it's Thanksgiving week as we're taping it. And a lot of blessings have come through this, blessings of community and of mentors and of a purpose and service. And I think you've found that too. When I see people hitting the ground and doing push-ups so they can be fit in honor of your brother, it moves me. When I see young pilots who aren't just kick-ass fighter pilots in their jet, but who are good leaders on their bases and in their communities, earn an award in my dad's name. That is good. That's good stuff. That's what they would want. That's their legacy living on. And if not me, then who?